The Russian foreign minister said that there will be no Russian involvement in the Ukrainian conflict, following a week of tension after the Ukrainian government claimed that Russian soldiers had crossed its border. Sergei Lavrov stated that the Russian troops the Ukrainian military claimed to have illegally caught had crossed an unmarked section of the border by accident. Lavrov also blamed the Ukrainian government and the West for escalating the situation in eastern Ukraine. This statement follows troop swaps yesterday between Russian and Ukrainian soldiers. Elsewhere, pro-Russian rebels retook control of the strategic town of Ilovaisk from Ukrainian forces after 2 weeks of fighting. The town is a major transport hub, and the place from which the Ukrainian army were hoping to take Donetsk, the rebel stronghold and the largest city in eastern Ukraine. In the Welsh city of Newport, 2,000 people took to the streets over the weekend to protest ahead of the planned NATO summit taking place there on the 3rd and 4th of September. The protest, which was organised by the Stop the War Coalition, was made up of people from all across the UK, in opposition to what they see as the imperialist and expansionist foreign policy of the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. More than 60 heads of state are expected to attend the summit this week, where discussion topics include the crisis in Ukraine, the threat of ISIS in Iraq, and the recent conflict in the Gaza Strip. Further protest is planned for the coming Thursday. Nathaniel Amos Sanson, The Report, Islam Channel.
Well, with me in the studio now to discuss some of what we saw in that news bulletin is Andy Hunder, who's director of the Ukrainian Institute in London. Welcome to the programme. So let's just clear up one thing, because there have been reports twice in the press, I think, in the last week, that there is actually a Russian armed column invading the Ukraine. That's not true, is it?
Well, Russian boots have been on Ukrainian soil since February, when Russia invaded Crimea. And ever since, over the last 3-4 months, it's been a hybrid war, where Russia has been funding and supporting the movement in Ukraine. It's been having an information war against Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll get on to that, but specifically the reports this week have been that there's been an armed column invading. Yes. And most people understand this to be like Hungary in '56 or something, but that's not happening, is it?
Well, the witnesses that we've seen, British journalists have seen the column crossing the border from Russia into Ukraine.
So you're saying there is an armed Russian column
Absolutely.
in Ukraine?
There's no doubt about this whatsoever.
Why haven't we seen the pictures of it?
Well, the pictures we've seen the pictures, the satellite pictures of NATO showing that these arms and tanks have crossed the border in Ukraine.
So there's a major armed column of the Russian army, not advisors,
absolutely,
not uniformed.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Why doesn't the British government believe that? I mean, the British government is very pro the Kiev administration, but they're saying no, that isn't happening. Why is that? Why are you seeing an invasion and the British government isn't?
Well, the British government, if we see what they've said over the last couple of days, is that they're saying this is unacceptable.
No, but they said there isn't. They say there's advisors, but they say there isn't an armed column. Why are they saying there isn't, and you're saying there is?
Well, NATO has clearly said that the General Secretary of the NATO has clearly said that Russian forces are in Ukraine. There are satellite pictures to prove this, and the British government is also saying this is unacceptable, whereby an independent state is being invaded by a foreign aggressor. I think one point that I really want to underline is the fact that Ukraine became independent 23 years ago. When it became independent, it had the 3rd largest nuclear arsenal in the world. Its nuclear arsenal was bigger than that of France, the United Kingdom and China combined. It was massive. And Ukraine gave this up voluntarily in exchange for assurances from the United Kingdom, from the United States and from Russia that its territorial integrity and sovereignty will be preserved. Since that, we've seen that it's been violated by Russia. Russia has invaded Ukraine. It's supporting Russian forces, Russian rebels in Ukraine, and the assurances that were made are not being adhered to. So what we're saying now that the United States and the United Kingdom must stand up to Russia and keep to these assurances that were made. This was signed in 1994. It was a document called the Budapest Memorandum, and it was signed by the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and the President of Russia. And that's what we're saying now, that this Budapest Memorandum must be revisited. And
so do you agree with
security assurances must be adhered to.
So the Ukrainian Foreign Minister has posted on his Facebook page just recently saying this is the real war has begun, this is going to be the greatest conflict since World War II. Do you think that's a responsible thing to do?
Well, Prince Charles, Hillary Clinton have compared President Putin to Adolf Hitler. The comparisons are clear. 1939.
They compare everybody to Adolf Hitler.
Sorry?
They compare everybody to Adolf Hitler. I mean, they compare Saddam Hussein,
1939 invasion of Poland, 2014 the invasion of Ukraine. I think the comparisons there are very, very strong.
So how much Western armaments would you like to see backing up the Kiev government?
Well, at the moment, Ukrainian forces...
Would you like to see US bombing in...
The Ukrainian forces are digging trenches to stop the tanks coming in from Russia, from the eastern border, which is a very porous border, where it's not being controlled and the Russians are moving in quite freely at the moment, where there are very few journalists being able to actually, independent journalists to show all this. But I think it's a matter of time before we will be seeing the pictures and the truth coming across.
So would you like to see a kind of deployment on the scale, say, of the last Iraq war in favour of the Kiev government?
In favour of a Ukrainian government, the vast majority of Ukrainians want to be part of one country, an independent Ukraine. I think the picture is being very much distorted.
In Crimea they didn't, they voted against it.
Well, the referendum in Crimea, it was a farce. In terms of, as Stalin said, it's not how people vote, it's how people count. That's what we saw in Crimea. There was
even the BBC said that that was a representative of the feeling in the Crimea, though.
It's in terms of the vast majority of Ukraine, Ukrainians, they want to be part of one country. 70% of people in Donetsk want to be part of an independent Ukraine. There is no major feeling, there is no major sentiment towards becoming part of Russia. And I think that must be understood from the very, very beginning, that these people have been living together for decades and they want to remain as one.
Do you think that what shattered that was that an elected government, whether or not you liked it or not, was displaced in a coup?
I think in terms of the terminology, I mean, this was a corrupt president that was removed by a democratically and replaced by a democratically elected president. President Poroshenko, there's no denying that. He's been democratically elected. He is the man in charge now.
After they seized power.
Yes, yes. In terms of Yanukovych was a corrupt president and he was removed by the people. The people stood up and they stood up for what? They stood up for human dignity and for values. Values of freedom of speech, value of rule of law and value of free press.
Okay, well that's afraid we're going to have to do it. Thanks very much for your views. And now it's time to see what's been making the news on Twitter. Journalist and environmentalist George Monbiot has tweeted about the government's anti-terror measures. He asks, how will they know which people going to Syria and Iraq are jihadis? Is it listed as occupation on their passports? Hashtag punishment without trial. Palestine is on the minds of many Twitter users. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign itself tells us nearly 500,000 Palestinian children in Gaza are unable to start a new school year as scheduled. And Nabila Ramdani says, turning all the people of Gaza into military targets has made them more determined to resist occupation and regular military invasion by Israel. On events in Iraq, the Twitter user @50ras reminds us the last US president not to bomb Iraq was Ronald Reagan. And looking at the unfolding crisis in Pakistan, @Matthew431 tweets, Pakistan is flirting with becoming another on the list of countries affected by a severe global crisis: Iraq, Syria, Libya. And it's exactly that civil conflict in Pakistan that we'll be looking at in the final part of the programme after this break. Do rejoin us then.